share myself with us. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Van Nuys City Hall. I'm Councilwoman Monica Rodriguez, Chair of our Public Safety Committee, and today is January 23rd, 2024. And Mr. Lidd, if you would please call the roll.
Yes. Councilmember Rodriguez,
Here.
Councilmember Lee, Councilmember McOsker,
Here.
Councilmember Park, Councilmember Soto Martinez.
Here.
Very good.
Thank you very much. Before we get started, I would like to let everyone know that, and I want to thank the members of the public. I know members from my community have come out. It's been some time, and I know this Friday, I know my colleagues are also very excited. If for some of them, it is their first time at Van Nuys City Hall, and just excited to be welcoming back the City Council to resuming on Friday. We will have our City Council meeting again here in the Van Nuys City Hall Council chambers, and want to thank Councilwoman Padilla for helping to bring that back. But we wanted to make sure we have a number of issues that face our city, specifically relating to public safety. And since the council has resumed meetings in public, wanted to make sure that we could commence this year's Public Safety Committee meetings here in the San Fernando Valley. So I want to thank our members of the public that have come out to join us here today. And of course, many of our part of the members of our team that are our first responders that have also joined us here this afternoon. But before we get started, I'd like to, many of you are aware, but today's conversation and the theme of this afternoon's meeting really focuses in on street racing and takeovers. And first of all, for those of you here in the audience, for full disclosure, my apologies, but my other prescription glasses are en route, which is why I am wearing sunglasses. For those that are listening by audio, I can't see without prescription, and I don't have my other glasses, but they are en route. So thank you for sparing me for a moment. So with that, I would like to recommend that to my colleagues. I'd like to recommend that items 3 through 9 and 11 through 18 would go on the consent agenda with the following recommendations. Items 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 to approve the recommendations in the CAO report and note and file the Board of Police Commissioners report. For item 9, approve the recommendations in the Board of Fire Commissioners report. We will be continuing item 10 to a future meeting as the report still needs some amendments. Oh, thank you. And we have now just been joined by Ms. Park. Thank you so much. Welcome to Van Nuys City Hall. And items 11 and 12, approve the recommendations in the CAO report, note and file the reports from the Mayor's office. Item 13, approve the recommendations in the CAO's report, note and file the City Attorney report. Item 14, approve the draft ordinance presented by the City Attorney. Items 15 through 18, approve the motions as written. And with that, I would like to now turn it over for public comment. And Ms. Kelly, if you would please provide the members of the public instructions on how to provide public comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To members of the public wishing to provide public comment, when it is your turn to speak, please state which of the agenda items you would like to speak on. You have 1 minute to speak on one agenda item or 2 minutes to speak on 2 or more agenda items. In addition, those who would like to address the committee with general public comment will be provided 1 additional minute for a maximum of up to 3 minutes per person for all agenda items, including general public comment. We will inform you when your time is up. When speaking on the agenda items, you must be on topic. And when in general public comment, you must be speaking to something within the subject matter jurisdiction of the committee. If you're not speaking on topic, or if we cannot tell whether you're on topic, you'll get a brief warning from me or the chair. If you do not immediately get clearly on topic, or you again stray off topic, you'll forfeit the rest of your speaking time and we'll move on to the next speaker.
Thank you. And for those of you in attendance, if you're not aware or wish to speak, provide comment on any of the agenda items or general public comment, you're welcome to go to the kiosk and sign up. But at this time, I have one speaker on the queue, Mr. Noel Weiss.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Could you please share which items you'd like to speak on?
Just general public comment.
Okay, you've got 1 minute.
Okay, well, now it's 53. Can I get a minute?
Yes.
Thank you.
We can restart that. Mr. Litt, if we could restart that clock for 1 minute.
It is going.
There we go. Go ahead.
Thank you, appreciate it. T3 plus 2, Ms. Rodriguez and Mr. Lee. I had the officers hand out some general information about these 2 tanks, 12.5 million gallon tanks that store collectively 25 million gallons of butane in San Pedro. For those of you who haven't visited, you probably should arrange a visit. My advocacy today is for Ms. Rodriguez and Ms. Park to get together so that we can have a joint committee hearing between both committees, Public Safety and T3, on solely the issue of the tanks so that the fire department can come in, so that the city attorney can weigh in, so that the public can weigh in and educate you all about what we're talking about in terms of the risk to public safety, because what Mr. McCosker talked about today in council is minor in comparison to what could happen in the event of an accident involving these tanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And like to call Gerardo Barrientos. Thank you for joining us. Good to see you.
See you too.
What items would you like to speak on?
Speed racing.
Okay, so just the one item?
Yes, relates to safety.
You have one.
I'm representing Shadow Hills, La Tuna Canyon, San Latahanga. I'm part of the committees, SETI committee, and also the beautification committee and the board of Shadow Hills. And we have a lot of accidents on San Lan Boulevard. With the neighboring District 6 all the way to La Crescenta, people tends to drive 60 miles, 65 miles in a 35 zone, in a 45 zone, and we have plenty of accidents. Every day is an accident. Yesterday we have a car knocking down a water hydrant, and it was a geyser, dangerous with these cables, the electrical cables that are part of the accidents that happened there. We haven't had fatalities lately, but we had fatalities before. And we want the lights that were promised to us. That's what I want to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. And that concludes general public comment. So we will go ahead and close general public comment. Mr. Litt, I know Ms. Park wanted to hold item 4 for remarks, so we will hold that on the desk. And Mr. Soto Martinez?
Okay with 6 for the separate vote, please?
And hold 6 for a separate vote. And the remaining items, 3, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10 was continued, and 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 through 18 on consent. If we can call the roll.
Very good. Okay, for items 3 through 9, Councilmember Rodriguez,
Aye.
Councilmember Lee. Aye. Councilmember McCosker,
Yes.
Councilmember Park,
Yes.
and Councilmember Soto Martinez.
Yes.
Okay, moving to items 11 through 15, because I believe 16 is a separate vote.
No, 6 is a separate vote.
6.
4 and 6 were held.
Okay, 4 and 6. Very good. In that case, 11 through 15 then. Councilmember Rodriguez,
Aye.
Councilmember Lee. Aye. Councilmember McCosker,
Yes.
Councilmember Park,
Yes.
Councilmember Soto Martinez.
Yes.
Okay, very good. 15, and the remainder then, did I miss something? 16 through 18 then?
You missed 4 and 6,
Okay,
because
4
4
and
and
6.
6 were held on the desk.
Okay, 4 and 6. hold
So
on.
we'll take 4 now, if you can read that into the record.
Sure. Item number 4, Board of Police Commissioners, Los Angeles Fire Department and Personnel Department reports relative to existing protocols for identifying and responding to new street drugs.
And I will turn it over to Ms. Park.
Thank you, Councilwoman Rodriguez, Madam Chair, for giving me the opportunity to share a few remarks about this item. I want to express my gratitude to our departments, LAPD, LAFD, and personnel for providing these reports. You all see this. Every day, there is another headline of another fatal overdose due to fentanyl or some other new illicit street drug like Trank or ISO, drugs that are increasingly deadlier and more potent. Just last month, the LA County Department of Public Health reported that fentanyl is now the leading cause of overdoses in Los Angeles County, robbing nearly 2,000 individuals of their lives and causing incalculable impacts to families, loved ones, and communities. As we grapple with these new street drugs, the intent of my motion was to ensure that we're all in communication and talking to each other to help in our response to this issue, and especially to ensure the safety of our city personnel who more and more frequently are coming in contact with these substances. Speaking from my experience just here in LA, our departments aren't always communicating with each other. And that challenge only gets more acute when we start dealing across government entities and agencies. After spending some time reading these reports, I am really pleased that a coordinated response to these new and existing street drugs is taking place with our county, state, and federal partners. And further, I'm pleased that we're sharing pertinent safety information with our first responders and our personnel who are unfortunately on the front lines of this national epidemic. Our librarians, our recreation and parks staff, our firefighters and paramedics, our police officers, our sanitation workers, and others. So I just want to express again my gratitude to our departments for putting this together, especially personnel, for the draft policy on this that I believe will have a citywide impact in keeping our first responders safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Park, and we do know how deeply, how it deeply affects so many, not just our first responders, but all our other city employees, as you indicated, because of our public facilities that are often, many of our public employees often exposed to a lot of these difficulties. So thank you so much. And with that, colleagues, I'd like to recommend that we approve this item. Mr. Litt, if you'd call the roll.
Very good. Councilmember Rodriguez,
Aye.
Councilmember Lee,
Aye.
Councilmember McOsker,
Yes.
Councilmember Park,
Yes.
Councilmember Soto Martinez.
Yes.
Very good, that matter is approved.
Okay, and item 6, please.
Very good, just a moment. Item number 6, Board of Police Commissioner and CAO reports relative to fiscal year 2023-24 real estate fraud prosecution program grant.
Thank you. Did you have any comments?
No.
Okay, we will go ahead and please call the roll.
Very good. Councilmember Rodriguez,
Aye.
Councilmember Lee,
Aye.
Councilmember McOsker,
Yes.
Councilmember Park,
Yes.
Councilmember Soto Martinez.
No.
Very good.
All right, thank you very much. And now that brings us to our primary topic for the conversation for today. Mr. Lidd, we will go ahead and begin our verbal presentation and combine it with item 2. If you would please read both those items 1 and 2 into the record, please.
Okay, item number 1, LADOT presentation on street takeovers and racing. Item number 2 is a Board of Police Commissioners and CAO reports relative to street racing and intersection takeovers.
Thank
Madam Chair, we also need to take a vote on items 16 through 18.
Oh,
Councilmember Rodriguez?
okay. Apologize, guys. So we're going to first take items, I'm sorry,
16 through 18.
16 through 18. We missed that vote. Okay. Aye.
Councilmember Lee? Aye. Councilmember McOsker?
Yes.
Councilmember Park?
Yes.
Councilmember Soto Martinez?
Yes.
Very good.
Terrific. Okay, now we can officially commence with this conversation for items 1 and 2. And colleagues, I'd like at this time, I know we are joined today by Dan Mitchell and Tim Framo from the Department of Transportation. Chief Graham and Commander Valenzuela from LAPD have also joined us here today. And I want to welcome you all to the Public Safety Committee meeting. And first, I want to invite our newest part of our city family, our General Manager, Laura Rubio Cornejo. I want to thank you for joining us here today. If you'd like to perhaps come and join us for some introductory remarks. And I know this isn't your first time in the San Fernando Valley because you've been to my district with me, so. But welcome officially to Van Nuys City Hall.
Is it?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Chair, council members, it's a pleasure to be here and to be in the Valley to report on where we are with addressing street safety. The department is committed to working closely with LAPD in piloting engineering solutions that may be effective in combating street racing, intersection takeovers, and street safety in general. To date, we have implemented pilot infrastructure at 5 key locations, one of which is in the Valley. And the intent of this is for us to be able to evaluate the effectiveness of these treatments and better understand what may not work, and then proceed accordingly. Based on the data so far, what we've learned is that engineering solutions are really limited for these type of concerns. However, we have 3 main treatments that we have implemented and are further evaluating: quick build traffic circles, rumble strips, and center line extensions. And I'm happy to go into each of those in more detail, although Dan or Tim might be much better at explaining the treatments themselves and their effectiveness and what we've learned so far from those that we've installed. That being said, while we learn what is working, what is not working, and what can be effective, what I can share is that the implementation of these have to be specific to each intersection, and that there isn't necessarily one solution that we can replicate throughout the city. What we also want to be mindful of is that as we are considering any of these installations, we want to work with the adjacent community members, particularly in residential areas. Sometimes, in my experience, we've installed treatment that can be disruptive to the residents, and while they're addressing one issue, we really then create a secondary issue. So really engaging those residents in particular, but community members in general, is really important. As we look into the feasibility of expanding these treatments to the additional 20 locations identified, we currently do not have the resources, but we're happy to report back on what resources might be needed, and then to also take into consideration what we can build into a budget request in order to be responsive. As of now, being able to respond and expand the program would require shifting priorities within the department in order to be able to address this issue, meaning other issues we would need to set them aside. With that, I'm happy to take any questions, or just if you'd like to have PD address first, and then I'm happy to answer questions either way.
Sure. I think we'll go ahead and commence with LAPD kind of setting the stage for what the call volume is with respect to that. I wanted to invite you and thank you for joining us here in the San Fernando Valley. As we know, street racing has increasingly become a more popular activity, street takeovers in particular, have had detrimental impacts to a lot of business corridors. Here in the San Fernando Valley, we've seen a great deal of impacts. I know business storefronts in my district, in Silmar, El Tarasco, the whole frontage of the building was wiped out. There are several intersections where this has become unfortunately, a regular activity in many parts of the city of Los Angeles and frankly throughout LA County. And I know it was a result of some of those circumstances that we first deployed many of these treatments and pioneered these efforts to see what a more permanent solution would be. And I want to thank everybody for coming out because these are very serious issues. They are a true threat to public safety. There are individuals that have lost their life in that one circumstance. Someone was, a fight ensued and someone was shot. And we know that this continues to be a prevalent issue, not just here in the San Fernando Valley, where sadly we have a greater invitation for such activities because of the width of our streets. But I also know that that's something that we're all working very closely on and securing ATP grants from the state to help do street calming measures and efforts that do make our streets safer, slow down traffic, as much as I know sometimes that might cause great consternation for a lot of members of the public. The reality is that we have to create a system of streets that creates protections for the shared use of these public right-of-ways. In my district, I always say we're always focused on creating shared safe spaces for bicyclists, motorists, pedestrians, and equestrians, because we have that added layer of dynamic in my district. But these streets are shared spaces and they're public spaces, and we have to create the opportunities for them to coexist without interfering or creating any further safety concerns, any further safety issues. And so with that, Chief Graham, it's good to see you.
And you, ma'am, am I on?
Yes.
Hello. Okay.
Yes. So thank you for joining us. And
Thank you, ma'am.
why don't you go ahead and set the stage for what we're seeing across our city with respect to street racing and street takeovers.
Absolutely. Members of the committee, thank you for having us here today. To our partners at DOT, we thank you for the consistent partnership. Dan, your appearances at our commanding officers meeting every week is extremely helpful for us to continue to calibrate for our traffic safety mission. So here with the Public Safety Committee in front of us, thank you very much for your partnership on that. So racing has been a part of human history since we've started recording history. We've been racing since we knew that we could get out in front of another person, and when we can't race each other, we'll put a number on something and race it. So it's part of our culture, and it's as much a part of the popular culture of Los Angeles, from Grease through Fast and the Furious, that it's been recorded in media. So we understand that there is a cultural aspect to street racing. But when, in the early 2000s, when I worked at Devonshire and I was the de facto street racing coordinator for Devonshire, and literally half the man I am today, it was a different picture than it is today. When the police arrived at the scene of an illegal street race, they ran. And now they double back and they ram police cars and they try to lynch the people who are causing this terrible, terrible, dangerous situation in our streets. In 2014, a plan was laid down by the gentleman to my right, who was a sergeant at Central Traffic at the time, to focus expertise on laws and the culture of this population so that we could go back to enforcing and also educating people on the dangers of street racing. And the Street Racing Task Force was formed in Central Bureau in 2015. Since then, the Street Racing Task Force has expanded to the entire city and has elements in all 4 of our operational bureaus. The street racing picture of today, as I said, is very different than it was. The Valley's picture being a sort of hybrid between the old days of racing for pinks and this new fascination. Does the DJ have a drop-in for me? No? Okay. We'll get some more of that music as our PowerPoint presentation goes on. So the Valley has its unique street racing picture. The West Side has a unique street racing picture with a fascination of folks en masse getting on off-road vehicles and taking over major streets on the west side of the city. And then the metropolitan area has the street takeovers and the illegal sideshows that are unfortunately taking lives while they are feeding what we believe just the beginning of the activity is based in social media recognition and the monetization of the videos that are being made and exploited in the social media piece. But as my team is going to show you, this activity has gone beyond just the street racing, beyond just the monetization of the social media, and it's creeped its way into organized crime, into part of our theft picture, and into human trafficking. So it's my pleasure to, first of all, introduce my partner, who is the commanding officer of Traffic Group, Commander Craig Valenzuela, who oversees the citywide street racing task force, which is led by Lieutenant Jesse Garcia. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lieutenant Garcia and have him go through our PowerPoint presentation for today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So the slide that we have up now just gives you an aerial view of what a typical street takeover looks like in Los Angeles. Whether it's in the Valley or in South Los Angeles, this is what it looks like. As you can see, it could be quite challenging to get any law enforcement assets in there to address the situation. It requires a lot of manpower to get it, just to address that and disrupt it, let alone take enforcement action. So this is where we as an organization look upon the city council to help us with legislation in combating this, because currently a lot of the laws are outdated. But this is, in addition to just the criminal nature of it in and of itself, it's a serious quality of life issue for the citizens of LA. This next slide this is a YouTube video. This is where these individuals glorify this activity and make money off of it. This is your typical Sunday night in Los Angeles. So that was just a third of that video. Typically when officers respond to these types of takeovers, the response is fireworks, laser pointers, rocks, bottles, vehicles fleeing in a very reckless manner, putting the public in danger, and obviously firearms. We've had several homicides throughout the city in the last few years directly related to this activity, in addition to the fatal crashes that we have had occur. And the majority of those, actually every single one, has been a hit and run as well. So it's just an ongoing problem that, as we see it now more so, it's just evolving into additional issues. I'm sure everybody in the last couple of weeks saw in Compton that stolen vehicle that was ran into that little store, and then it was ransacked. Okay, that was these individuals right here at a takeover making that happen. Obviously, we do a lot of training, both in service within LAPD and our allied agencies, in addressing these takeovers. This is a very graphic video of an incident and this happened in another state, but an officer who responded to a takeover and over-penetrated it. This problem is not exclusive to Los Angeles, it's nationwide. At this point, the officer's been surrounded, they're beating on his car, they're trying to open the doors, and they're moving from the vehicle. So, one of the main goals of our training when we train other law enforcement personnel is what not to do, namely that. Also, our air units deal a lot with the laser pointers, with laser strikes. That's a very, very big problem that we have occurring on a regular basis. Our apprehension rate is maybe 20% because usually you saw the size of that crowd, it's hard to pinpoint where that laser came from. But we do have some successes with that. Also, this was a takeover that occurred just outside the
Sheriff's
city.
deputy opens fire as a seemingly crazed suspect repeatedly rams his patrol car with an SUV in an attack in Bell Gardens early this morning.
A stunned bystander shot this video of that violent scene. The deputy was trying to get the suspect to stop
this was a
speeding
takeover
and
that had
doing
just
donuts in an
dispersed.
intersection.
Let's
This
get right out
individual
to
was
you.
still
Chris
there
Wolf
doing
standing
donuts
by
when the
live
when
in
the
Bell
deputy
Gardens
arrived.
with details for us tonight.
And
Chris.
The video is pretty graphic of this individual
say a driver in
ramming
Bell
the police
Gardens
car.
started doing donuts and reckless maneuvers at the intersection of Florence and Eastern Avenues around 4:30 Thursday morning. An LA County deputy was in the area and took immediate action to warn other drivers and conduct a traffic stop. But as you can see in the cell phone video, instead of complying, the driver of the white SUV continually rams the driver's side of the patrol vehicle. After the third collision, the deputy opens fire. Still, the SUV driver continues the onslaught, and the deputy continues firing.
So this behavior is very brazen. I won't bore you with a whole video because I'm sure you can understand how it ended. But the activity and the behavior, the response to law enforcement is very brazen. Citizens that stumble into this activity as well are met with the same consequences. Their vehicles being rammed, they get removed from their cars, robbed, carjacked, you name it. So again, it's just, we do make headway, but just the additional support is very necessary from the city council. Another one of the elements that we're dealing with is stolen vehicles. It's been a plague for a very long time now with these vehicle takeovers. They're stealing hot commodity vehicles, Mopar products, you know, Dodges, Camaros, Chevys, Dodge, pickups, and ultimately they're either being picked up by these people and used at these takeovers. It's not their car, they don't care, they destroy it, they run it into buildings, it doesn't matter. But the task force has been working with Los Angeles County TRAP on a lot of investigations related to this. And NICB, because there's a lot of insurance fraud that's being committed in addition to everything else. Fraudulent claims, which ultimately impact the consumer, which is all of us. And again, it's just, they're very blatant about it, and almost as though they operate as though there's zero consequence. And unfortunately, depending on which county we're in, because we do operate with our allied partners in other counties, the penalties are a little lighter in Los Angeles. So this seems to be the nexus of a lot of this activity. These are just some legal definitions that we enforce. Reckless driving, we have 2 Los Angeles Municipal Code sections that we use for spectators. The task force is also authorized to enforce county ordinances that are very similar to the spectator LAMC sections that we have on the books right now. One of the greatest tools that we have is the ability to still impound cars for 30 days based off of reckless driving, exhibition of speed, and evading officers when they're trying to make enforcement action. It's a very valuable tool. Ultimately, you know, the mindset behind it is not to punish the violator. It's to remove the instrument being used to commit the act. And with legislation like that, it does give us some teeth, but ultimately, it's only 30 days. Those 30 days are gonna end and the vehicle goes back to the owner and it's right back again. It's a vicious cycle. There's been vehicles we've taken 6 or 7 times in the span of a year. And the activity continues. Another tool that we have is judicial seizure orders to seize vehicles that are used in this activity. Current legislation only allows us to take those cars for 30 days on a judge's order. The tricky part is finding the vehicle. Because of the mobility aspect, we have to track the vehicle down. It takes a lot of hours to find a vehicle that committed the act and then impound it in the middle of the night. But this task force enforces the laws as judiciously as they can, and we are effective. I mean, we do mitigate the activity in certain areas, but it migrates somewhere else. I know there was a conversation previously about the traffic measures in the intersections, and they are overall successful, but it does also create an effect that the activity migrates away somewhere else. So it's a constant, dog chasing its tail. We're effective, but then we got to deal with it somewhere else. So it's something to definitely keep in mind when we're talking about these measures. And a lot of these, just in general, a lot of these car clubs, they're not car clubs, they're actually criminal in nature and are meeting the definition per the California Penal Code of a criminal street gang. The task force is currently in the process of obtaining the predicates to label several of these groups that you see listed as criminal street gangs, which is going to allow our prosecutors to add gang enhancements to any penalties or any convictions that they receive. And we're currently working with the DA's office on that, with that respect. And all of these logos, these are all on vehicles. These are stickers. They're very proud of what they do, and they stick out like a sore thumb in neighborhoods. Any driver that we catch engaged in this activity is automatically sent to the DMV for a reevaluation of their driver's license status, if they have a driver's license. At least 30% of our cases, they're unlicensed drivers to begin with, so there's not a whole lot the DMV can do to them. But at least their names are entered into the DMV system and their names are flagged. That concludes the PowerPoint presentation. Turn it over to Commander Valenzuela.
Good afternoon. I'd just like to give you a few numbers, give you a sense of the rate at which the SRT and our patrol officers are dealing with these. But I would tell you, you're going to hear a lower number at the end. Please don't be fooled by that lower number. So from 2019 all the way to 23, these are the annual yearly races and takeovers. So 2019, 319, 2020, 912, 2021, 794, 2022, 822, and in 2023, 482. And that is a 41% or 340 incident decrease. But I would say that decrease largely comes not because the folks aren't, the street racers aren't out there, but the street racing task force has been successful in getting out in front of it and preventing and using the intelligence, using the resources to get them before and they leave the LAP, and then they'll leave LAPD jurisdiction or try to get to another spot. So,
Well, I will say, based on those numbers and the timing, it would make sense in 2020 when we were all stuck at home, that there were those that didn't stay at home. We would hear them often. I know in my own neighborhood, while everybody was on lockdown, not everybody was practicing staying safe at home. So I think that I don't want to say it's artificially, but it was because there was so little activity on the street, it did open it up, literally, for more of this activity to happen in 2020.
absolutely an outlier that I think we can easily explain. I completely agree. But the other part of this is also the yearly traffic citations and Bureau of Automotive Repair citations that our folks are, and again, not to give you all the numbers, but give you a sense of 2022, it was 3,068, and then in 2023, it was 4,829. So our folks are still out there. The officers are, as Street Racing Task Force and others are doing these inspections, doing the citations, and obviously very busy.
So before I open it up to questions, I just wanted to capstone some of what we were talking about. First, to your point, Madam Chair, I think that we saw the evolution of racing to this street takeover model really gain its footing in 2020. these large groups of people who were clearly subverting the safer at home order, going out and doing whatever it is that they wanted to do. The sideshow literally started from the concept of they were burning cars in the intersections off of where the main street race was happening while they were killing time waiting for their turn to actually race. So they were literally the sideshows of the main show that was going on. And somehow, because of the ability to record the activity from both inside the car and outside the car, it gained incredible notoriety on social media. But what's happened is these clubs that Jesse showed you are utilizing their fame or their infamy, whichever you want to call it, on social media and gathering quite a following, and then turning around and using that following to be involved in other criminal activity. So one well-known, well-established burglary for motor vehicle tactic is for people who are in need of cheap auto parts will get together a group of gang members and give them what they call a shopping list and have them go out into the public and steal these things off of cars. Well, now this process is all automated on the internet, and all the people that want to support these car clubs partake in this internet frenzy of going out and committing crimes in the name of their car club. So it's moved into this other avenue of organized crime, and it's not just the danger that it represents, although we can't underscore the danger that it represents. I had to be at a press conference to give closure to the family of a young lady that was killed on Christmas Day in South Los Angeles in 2022. When she was attending a spin out or a sideshow, and the vehicle that was involved in the sideshow clipped a tow truck and plowed into the crowd and took her life. Now, it's interesting to note that that young man's 22 years old. When he gets convicted of vehicular homicide, which I'm confident that he will be, that will be his 8th conviction for a street racing related offense. So this is one of the challenges that we face in this, and Jesse had alluded to the non-accountability. We are allied with an organization called StreetRacingKills.org, and they're an outreach organization, and they have been certified by the DA's office to do diversion for people prior to conviction when they're arrested for these crimes. They go to classes and they learn from the incredibly powerful stories of the 2 women who founded this organization, who both lost children to street racing, and now continue to turn that anger into positive action in the community by trying to prevent this activity from occurring and interdicting when these kids are involved in this. In her latest class that started in November, a young man came in and announced that this was his 7th diversion program, and that the previous arrests for street racing, because they had happened all around Los Angeles, Orange, San Bernardino counties, nobody ever connected the dots, and so he's been able to go and dodge prosecution 7 times for this. Which brings me to another point. The first video that you saw was happening in Los Angeles, but not everybody you saw in that video was from Los Angeles. These car clubs, they migrate around the state. Some car clubs come from San Francisco to spin in Los Angeles. Some of our car clubs from Los Angeles go to spin in San Francisco. We get a large influx of Orange County spinners every weekend that come here and trash our landmarks, like the 6th Street Bridge. And they're doing it because the backdrop to their social media video is enhanced by having the 6th Street Bridge, Echo Park, the Hollywood sign, those iconic locations, Hollywood and Highland, those iconic locations in the shot is what gets them the clicks and the likes, which gets them the money that they get from advertising from these social media groups. So what are we doing? Right, so obviously we have our task force. They are very trained and dedicated officers, and Jesse and the 2 sergeants that are here that represent the supervision of the Metropolitan Task Force. I couldn't thank them enough that they do the work that they do. And from a shift work standpoint, this is an every weekend thing. These guys are out there every weekend doing this. But we're working both with the state legislature to take a look at tightening up the state laws that apply to this. There once was a city ordinance that allowed us to seize vehicles and crush them. And I think it was under Nooch when he was the city attorney. And after 8 press conferences in the Valley, street racing came to a screeching halt, if you'll excuse the pun, in the Valley. But in 2008, the city attorney had opined that that particular ordinance that gave us that authority was preempted by an existing state law. And it wasn't the street racing portion, but it had to do with narcotics. And their opinion was to put a moratorium on the seizure of vehicles. That moratorium continues to exist today, and we have asked again, under the Fuhrer administration, for them to relook at the parameters of that, and they maintain that they still believe that that ordinance is preempted by state law and that we should continue to not enforce it. So with that in mind, myself, the city attorney's office, we reached out to the state legislature and attempted to get the attention of a state legislature to perhaps make a change in state law, which was taken up by Assemblymember Marsucci, who introduced Assembly Bill 74, which this council graciously approved in resolution to make it the official lobbying position for the city. This ordinance would define sideshows as its own subsection crime under the current crime. Because aiding and abetting is very difficult to prove in court when you're trying to prove conspiracy, where multiple people are working towards the same end of shutting down a street in concert. But you can prove it if we define sideshows in state law. It would tighten up some of the loopholes in getting your car back and avoiding the 30-day impound penalty. And then after, with judicial review and the proper due process, would get to a point where if a judge determined that you had enough convictions, the state would then seize your car and destroy it. Again, to the lieutenant's point, our whole goal with this is not to put a lifetime penalty on a youthful, stupid decision. 96% of the people that we arrest for these crimes are under 25 years old. So, but to remove their implements of destruction, right? Especially if you've been convicted 2, 3, 4 times. Clearly the message is not being sent through the criminal justice system, and we'd have to resort to that. So unfortunately, due to the environment in Sacramento, AB 74 was pulled off of from the floor on this legislative session, and the Assemblyman is reintroducing it under another bill number, which we do not have yet, but as soon as we do have it, we'll transmit it to the City Council. We will again be asking for the city's support to allow us to lobby for that particular bill. But the last piece that in good faith that I have to come to you and bring to your attention is the lack of safe alternatives. There isn't a venue in the city that would allow people who have a legitimate interest in racing or vehicle automotive sports to exercise that. They would have to go out to Irwindale. And Irwindale actually, and this came as a shock to me, but Irwindale lays down every Friday and Saturday night, K-Rail, just specifically to create burn boxes to allow people who like this drifting activity to exercise that activity in safety. But that's in Irwindale. And so while obviously as a police officer looking for tools for accountability, I would also ask that city leadership take a look at opportunities, that we could create opportunities within the city to allow for activity like this to be done in a safe and controlled manner, so that there is an alternative to just enforcement. When I was doing street racing enforcement in the early 2000s, we partnered with NHRA and we handed out free racing passes before the races started, trying to engage in dialogue to say, don't go out and race dangerously tonight. Here, go out on us. Go out on a Thursday and race all you want. At least it's controlled and it's safe. So I don't think that it would be in good faith to have an enforcement and accountability conversation without also having a conversation about safe alternatives that we can provide to the youth of Los Angeles. And with that, I open it up for any questions that the committee members may have.
Thank you. I want to give an opportunity for my colleagues to ask questions, but thank you for providing the comprehensive context of obviously what's not just happening here in the San Fernando Valley, across the city, but across the county, across all, different parts of California. This has not been an anomaly here. This is something that has been prevalent. And to your point, the conversation about what Irwindale does has constantly been an example of how they try to provide the space for something that many people, in their youth enjoyed,
I had a 1984 Honda Civic, so I didn't really partake much in the street racing scene.
My father had a Roadrunner in Cypress Park. I got it. So so there's clearly a long-standing history, and we understand. That's not the point. The point is that when it endangers, not even those that willingly participate, they know what they assume their own risk when they go out and partake in these activities. The problem is when it affects everyone else, and when it affects the business owners who are then impacted by the destruction of their private property and their business and their livelihood. When, as the example that you mentioned, I believe it was in Compton, where this small mom and pop business was then looted. All of those circumstances are the things that are just, they go beyond what just a street takeover or a sideshow, as you call it, would, it goes well beyond, and it's exploitive of, and, causes a whole host of public safety concerns. With the call loads, and thank you for providing all the context with the numbers, the call loads per the report, it appeared that the Valley did have the most calls. And obviously the way our streets, the width of our streets, and I know for Sepulveda, for example, Sepulveda Boulevard in the San Fernando Valley is the width of the 118 freeway.
Oh, yeah.
So it's, and by the way, our ATP work, Mission Mile will change that. But, gotta get cracking on that, guys. But this is, but again, it is conducive for this type of activity, and it does kind of elicit this type of response. Metro is the lead enforcement agency, but there's not enough crashes for traffic enforcement, I guess is what we're saying in terms of the dynamic with Metro's role. So how
Meaning the MTA?
for, no, for, so
You
Metro Division.
Metropolitan Division. So because Metropolitan Division is sort of the skunk works of our tactics. That's where we're trying to work with them as the groups and the activity continues to evolve. We need to make sure that our tactics are evolving. As the lieutenant had said, you saw some of the scenes that we're dealing with, and sending 2, 3, 4 black and whites into the middle of that crowd is just inviting disaster, as was demonstrated in the other video. So utilizing other resources in order to, and utilizing other tactics is important as we work on it. The reason that we don't want to jump in the middle of that group and start enforcing traffic is simply because it's so dangerous now for both the officers and, quite frankly, for the public. Once it's established that the police are coming with a substantial number where the lynching and the turning about is not going to be effective for the crowds, they've already predetermined an escape route on social media using encrypted social media communications. So they're already thinking about going to the next place where they're going to set all this up. The problem is that if we kick the beehive, they're going to take off from that location in an absolutely reckless manner. And now the entire surrounding community is potentially threatened by people who are leaving that scene in excess of 80, 90, 100 miles an hour on city streets. So that's why we put that in there. But as the lieutenant alluded, we're getting a lot of success with after the fact judicial warrants and after the fact filings. Because now we're getting smarter on the use of technology for this enforcement instead of just rushing in there like I did back in 2000.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lee?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Lieutenant, I think I heard you say this. Why can't we do anything when they don't have license? Well, what's the penalty? You're saying that we can take them to DMV and suspend their license, but if they don't have a license, there's nothing that can be done?
Typically, I was referencing DMV reevaluations for licensed drivers, but if you don't have a license, the Department of Motor Vehicles can't really do anything except give you an index number. And when you do decide to go try to get a driver's license, then, you know, it's a kind of a long-term thing, like, oh, by the way, your license is suspended, because you never had one to begin with.
Chief, have we looked into different other infrastructure things that we can do? Like, I heard something, we tried rumble strips, but then that just annoyed everyone that was around. And, they would just hear the rumble home, they're like, please bring back the street races. Like, is there, like something called, there's something called bot stops or something?
Yes.
Like, you know, to put in intersections to, improper locations, or is that something we're looking at, or are there infrastructure things that we can look at?
Yes, but I'm going to defer that question if you don't mind to my genius engineers over at the DOT.
Thank you, Councilmember, thanks. So a couple of treatments that we've installed and are testing for their effectiveness, temporary or quick build traffic circles, the rumble strips, which are the dots that seem to really annoy residents, especially when there's a number of vehicles, taking over or trying to, and then central line extensions. Those are 3 treatments that we think can be effective to help minimize the attractiveness of certain intersections. But again, there isn't one solution for every single intersection that we can just replicate. It really needs to be determined by what the issue is, the geometry of that intersection, and the adjacent land uses, in order to be able to determine what the best approach would be.
And Chief, today I introduced a motion to transfer funds to purchase license plate readers in Council District 12, so that we would have a number of these throughout the Council District. If we place those at problem intersections or problem areas, is that something that the LPRs can help with?
Absolutely, because if we can sit off and monitor that activity, not only is it safer for everybody involved, but as they start leaving through the intersections that have the ALPR cameras on it, the ALPR cameras capture the license information as they leave. So it doubles down on the idea when we present this for prosecution or for a warrant for a judicial seizure, that if they claim that, well, my car was never there, oh, yes, it was, we have the video and we have you leaving the location to the ALPR. So yes, it would be effective for intelligence.
Okay, so is that something that we currently, do we have that ability? I know what we're using it for, so that if you have a warrant for a stolen car, you're in my district, crimes, burglaries have gone up, to identify those and let the station be aware of that. So is it some type of, is it new programming, or is it something that we?
No, it's a latent feature of the ALPR cameras. So what they're capturing license data constantly as they are reading license data as it goes by the area of effectiveness of that. They keep that database in there, and then they're just constantly comparing that database against SVS or against CWS or whichever system they're using to get the alert that we're asking for, whether it's a stolen vehicle or a warrant for the car. But all of that data is contained in whatever it is, whatever memory it is that they use. So whether it's remote or it's something that we have to go pick up on a regular basis, but that stuff is in there. So we've used that effectively in other avenues of doing investigations where we just need to capture the data on who's at a location. ALPRs are fantastic for that.
Okay, great. So AB 74, or whatever its new name is going to be, is there anything missing from that, Lieutenant or Commander or Chief, that
Well,
you think we could add?
Well, so 74 in itself, we're still in the negotiation phase. There's a lot of different aspects to it. Like one of the things that we've asked for, that we're pretty sure we're not going to get, but we've asked for it, is that the street racing group of crimes, the street racing suite of crimes, right, where it's street racing, aiding and abetting, and this new subsection that would be created, that they be exempted from diversion. Right? Or that diversion has to be an opt-in by a judge and not an automatic default. Because the unfortunate thing is, part of the reason someone can get 7 diversions is nobody ever gets convicted of it if it's automatic diversion. So that's one of the things we're looking for. Obviously, the seizure rule, more tightening up of a vehicle, of license suspension by a judge upon conviction of this. So these are things that we're all asking for in 74. But one of the things that we did in our conversations with our allied partners, the city of Compton has a similar ACE citation that we have here, an administrative non-criminal citation. And because of the tremendous problem they were having there, and by the way, I can't stress enough the symbiotic relationship between crowds and sideshows. Nobody that's sliding around by themselves in an intersection is doing this for the same reason. There are going to be people that do donuts in intersections without an audience for all variety of reasons. That's not what we were talking about. We're talking about this commercialized, everybody meet at this intersection, we're going to take it over with 400 or 500 people, and we're going to have all these people filming. The relationship between the crowd and the activity is symbiotic. One does not exist without the other, right? And so in Compton, they increased the penalty for their ACE citation to $2,000. And for quite a long time, that was a very good deterrent for pushing that activity out of Compton. So unfortunately, effectiveness, no good deed goes unpunished. So as the rest of the county got better at doing street racing enforcement, and then the notoriety of Compton attracted those crowds back in there that were willing to risk a $2,000 ACE citation. But exploring using administrative citations, again, to avoid a criminal conviction, but just to create an accountability measure for people who want to be involved in this illegal activity would be helpful from the city standpoint.
And, I know that we started looking into, San Jose was doing something about going to promoters. There's other people that are thinking, lack of better term, just outside the box, going after different parts, like maybe the advertisers that, pay or whatever, if it's YouTube or whatever social media apps. Have we spoken, have we had discussions with the social media apps about, look, this is an illegal activity that you are helping promote and also support?
In the summer of last year, the chief of police sent a letter to every social media platform that shows video. So, and I couldn't even name them all if I wanted to, but that basically put them on notice that they're broadcasting and profiting on the filming and exhibition of illegal activity, and that it's dangerous and that it causes property damage. So I had brought this to a friend of mine who just happens, he happens to be a friend of mine, but he's a judge. And that since these companies have been put on notice, if and when the city of Los Angeles realizes any actual damage, and we can prove that the damage was caused by vehicles who then posted that video on social media, and there was a monetization of that video, we could go after that platform for the damages that were accrued by the city. So that is a conversation that we're in with the city attorney.
And what is your current conversation with the city attorney? You said that, I remember, I was here in the
Yeah.
city, because I believe it was Councilmember Smith working with our city attorney regarding the crushing of the vehicles. I remember the visual.
Yes.
doing that, and that you're right, it was a quick deterrent.
Yes.
And probably saved a lot of lives because all of that type of activity stopped. What is the current city attorney's feelings on, we've had two city attorneys now.
Yes.
They don't believe that that's legal, that state law preempts us in being able to do that.
They are standing by that, they're standing by that decision, is that the state law currently preempts the city's ability to seize vehicles under ordinance, because that mechanism already exists in one form at the state level. Part of the rationale of going to the state and asking for help is if they make it a state law, then it can't be preempted by state law.
Sounds like a smart idea, smart.
Well, and the other thing is, to the lieutenant's point, they can't go run to another jurisdiction and hide.
Thanks, Chief, appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Ms. Park?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Laura, I wanted to come back to the 5 locations that have already received some form of treatment. Have the calls for service abated at those locations since treatments were put in?
So let me first, if I can, highlight or call out the 5 locations, and then I'll defer to, in terms of calls, I'll defer to the police here to respond. So one location, Glen Oaks Boulevard and Polk. And that was in response to intersection takeovers. We have Bellevue Avenue and Kensington Road. Plummer Street between Canoga Avenue and Owensmouth, that was for street racing specifically. Haskell Avenue between Strathern Street and Saticoy, and along the 6th Street Bridge. And I'll defer to the chief in terms of whether that's deterred activity.
So, at the Glen Oaks location, it certainly has deterred the activity in that intersection, but they moved one intersection over. The 6th Street Bridge has become much less of a target than it was at its opening. We will occasionally get the one that wants to highlight themselves or whatever to go out there. But I think that the treatments there have abated the almost daily attempts at activity that we had there several months ago. I will defer to Lieutenant Garcia on the other location.
So with regards to the Kensington location, the last re-engineering by DOT has been effective in curbing a lot more of the activity. That, just because of the nature of that area, because of the Fast and Furious franchise, you get a lot of tourists going over there, setting up parking, taking pictures, occasionally doing burnouts, but nothing compared to what it was in the last, 2.5, 3 years ago.
Okay, thank you. Since the Police Commission report was issued back in June, has DOT had an opportunity to conduct any kind of an assessment of the priority locations identified in that report to evaluate for what kinds of treatments might be appropriate?
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and defer to Dan Mitchell on that.
Thank you, Dan Mitchell, Assistant General Manager for LADOT. And I don't believe that we've been instructed to evaluate, expand the program to additional intersections. We're piloting this treatment at just a small number to see what the effect would be. And it sounds like, depending on the circumstances, we've had various levels of effectiveness. We may not be completely changing the behavior, but changing where the behavior occurs.
Okay, well, Dan, quick follow-up question for you. Just from, a liability perspective, we are now on notice of recurring dangerous conditions at certain locations. What is our obligation to intervene and take proactive steps to keep people in those places safe?
So we're certainly happy to explore what the treatments could be for those additional locations that have been highlighted. We would need to assess the resources we have available, to be quite honest, in terms of whether we have the staffing to be able to design and then implement those treatments. But we can look at those locations that have been identified in the report and determine what treatments might be best, and then lay out potential costs for implementation. And again, for some of these treatments, particularly where we're talking about rumble strips, we want to make sure that we're engaging adjacent residents to ensure that they understand the implications of the rumble strips.
I think that as we head into budget season, it would be very helpful to have a financial picture of these competing priorities, especially as we are looking at and evaluating other things like implementation strategies for our city's mobility plan and things like that. You mentioned that there are different communities around the city are impacted by different kinds of racing. In the west side, you mentioned what we tend to see a lot of in my council district are off-road vehicles that are not street legal. I'm not sure whether there are any engineering treatments that will necessarily prevent that behavior. I am a bigger proponent of the cameras and the ALPRs, but I'm curious, aside from cameras, what are the approaches that could be on the table to address the issues that are uniquely seen on the west side?
From an engineering perspective?
Tim Framo, LADOT. I think depending on the type of location, certain tools can work more effectively than others. So for example, smaller streets that intersect in large, wide intersections, we've had success with putting in traffic circles and raised features that can prevent any type of vehicle really from wanting to enter the intersection or try to do this at those locations. So it can work for all off-road or not. But the challenge we have is when we have these sort of typical four-legged intersections that create a large square that we can only encroach into so much. That's when, regardless of the type of vehicle, like it limits our ability to sort of constrain the physical intersection. But at Polk and Glen Oaks, it seems that it's caused the behavior to move. Now the question then is, you know, what do we do then? Because they're going to move to the intersection that's a block away. So how far do we chase them? That's, I think, the biggest challenge with those big square-shaped intersections where a lot of this behavior happens.
So for a location like PCH and Temescal Canyon that intersects with Caltrans, are you talking to Caltrans? Are you collaborating with them on potential strategies?
Yes, we collaborate with our friends at the state on a number of issues, and so any intersection that is partially or entirely managed by Caltrans would require their evaluation as well and support for those types of treatments. But we certainly work hand in hand with them, and if the direction is to move forward on these 20 intersections, then yeah, PCH and Temescal and also Lincoln and Manchester would be included.
Okay, thank you for that. And then one final question just to LAPD. Do you have what you need in terms of resources to monitor both the social media side and the prevention side of things, and to deploy resources in real time and to follow up in the aftermath? Because if you don't, and there are additional pieces that are missing, that's information that we would like to know.
So, thank you, Councilmember. Obviously, the biggest deficiency that we have right now is staffing. I know that all of our folks are working on staffing and increasing the Los Angeles Police Department back up to its authorized strength. LAPD has shrunk by 8% since 2019, but the traffic commands that are under the command of Commander Valenzuela here have shrunk by 28% during that same period. And while yes, absolutely, we have to focus on the operations mission, that when people pick up the phone and call 911, that a patrol unit is coming. The issue becomes when traffic falls off of traffic's radar, a patrol unit just does not have the expertise to conduct a traffic investigation in a timely manner, as opposed to a traffic unit. And so I've been working, the commander has been working with our personnel division within the department to continue to try to get folks that want to transfer to traffic into traffic. We have other, the other thing would be to actually fund the positions for the Street Racing Task Force. The Street Racing Task Force now, the lieutenant included, is a loan from Central Traffic to the Street Racing Task Force. I have presented a plan to the department about centralizing the Street Racing Task Force under the command of Commander Valenzuela at Traffic Group, and having those positions be specifically funded for the department, and then those positions that currently are on loan can be resuscitated to the traffic divisions so that they can go back out and do their primary mission, which is engineering, enforcement, and education. So those two pieces. We talk about video a lot. We had a fairly robust conversation with DOT about the ATSAC cameras, but the ATSAC camera system is a live-only system. It doesn't capture information. So it would not be helpful for after-the-fact prosecution or for the assistance of investigations for hit and runs. So my detectives, like I'll use that the example of that the young lady who was killed in the street race in South Los Angeles. They walked and door knocked businesses and residences a mile around all of where that incident took place, to look for the escape route that the suspect used to leave the scene after he killed that young lady and injured about 16 other people. And so to be able to replace the legwork with technology would be very helpful as well. So there are a lot of technology intercepts that we don't have time to talk about today, which we can prepare for you and give to you in that regard. But I think that our number one goal is personnel, both from a enforcement standpoint and investigative standpoint and education standpoint. Lieutenant Commander, do you have anything to add to that?
Thank you for that. I really appreciate that. And I hear you loud and clear on the personnel. You've certainly piqued my interest in the technology that can be used. I think that goes a long way to keep our police officers and the public safe, great for situational awareness, as well as having the record that you need for the actions that you can take when things are safer to get involved on the enforcement side. So appreciate your time and the effort that went into these reports. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Park. And thank you all. Mr. Soto Martinez, did you have? You're good. Thank you all. This isn't something that, it's not new. I want to thank, first of all, one of the things that I've said, and it comes as a result of having seen I have a lot of high injury networks in my district, separate and apart from everything that's happened with street takeovers and street racing. There's a natural inclination. Well, we built the city more intently around making sure that traffic moves quickly. It wasn't necessarily by design historically to also take into consideration that we have, like particularly if you look at my district where I have a lot of public transit users, where we have a lot of people on bikes because they can't, having a vehicle is a luxury in our community. So when you have a lot of these circumstances, it starts to shift how we approach street design. And I want to thank DOT because Tim and Dan are very, very, very informed and well-versed on the issues of the 7th District. Laura's increasingly becoming so. But, she just got here, so we're giving her time. We're giving her time.
What a 4 months.
But, but DOT has been an important partner, and I've said this to Mr. Harris Dawson, where I know we had a lot of hit and runs in South Los Angeles. I can think about a lot of locations where, again, separate apart from this issue. For me, I don't know that we will ever have the police resources to police these issues, number one. And so creating the conditions on our street that help to deter these activities, for me, has always been more cost effective. It's always been a more expedited solution to get to the root of the problem. And so, for example, the lane extensions that we installed to try in front of El Tarasco and where the real terrible circumstance occurred, I believe it was in 2021. That has shown substantial improvement. Street calming efforts, from traffic circles to the bollards, which, look, I caught hell on, but no one's dying. It was a marked shift from what we were doing. I don't want to put, as much as I value all of the intelligence that we could collect from many of the camera installations, and these other technology tools to aid us. I also recognize, to your point, Chief, that you indicated that many of the license plates, the VIN numbers, they're forgeries. So to some extent, I don't know that even that helps us truly in getting to the perpetrator. If, depending on the circumstances, we can collect this information, but if they just swap out a paper plate, I don't know that you're getting any new intel that might help get you to an arrest with that individual. So for me, it's always been about how do we invest in the prevention, right? Prevention is just like health. It's just much more cost effective. It's just investing on that part of it is also a huge return on investment. At least we've seen it in my district, and I want to thank our very strained DOT engineers and staffing, because you guys have done an incredible job with limited resources. And of course, LAPD having to, again, I always hear about the requests for traffic enforcement. Everyone wants a traffic enforcement officer on their block. And that's just not, we have over 460 square miles in the city of Los Angeles. That's just, it's not going to happen. So how do we kind of address both concerns in a manner that helps to achieve the greatest outcomes, for public safety that we're all looking for. So this is where you all are such an incredible dynamic duo that helps make our streets safer, provided you have the right resources to actually implement these things. And identifying, and I want to thank you for these reports, and these were things that we started talking about last year. Much of it also derived from, a lot of the work that we were testing and working on in my district. And I want to thank, Eve Sinclair. I know you can't hear this, but one of my staff members who was this was such her deep passion and did such a great job in some of our most difficult areas of implementing these types of traffic calming measures and working very closely with you all. And I just want to thank you all for your incredible work. But colleagues, I want to thank everybody for the thoughtful conversation. And I'd like to move that we adopt the recommendations in the CAO report, note and file the Board of Police Commissioners report, but with the following amendments. I'd like to request that the police department report on the 50 locations throughout the city that have continuous issues with street takeovers and racing, and request that DOT report back on the needed funding to install raised center lanes in an additional 50 locations, so that we can kind of coalesce these efforts and start to take on the most critical intersections that are being impacted in the city. And we know, to your point, we know that when we address those, they're going to find 50 new ones. But we got to start somewhere. And let's start where we're getting our greatest call volume. And I believe, Ms. Park, did you have an amendment as well?
I do, and I was just going to request that DOT also report back on those treatments, including cameras specifically, at those, as well as the cost and timeline to implement at those top 100 locations. Okay. Thank you.
Chair, if I could just ask for clarification, you specifically called out centerline treatments. Do you want us just to report back on?
Appropriate
treatments?
We'll say
Got it.
appropriate treatments, because to your point, depending on the area, obviously, there's not a one-size-fits-all. So recommended treatments and cost for each of those treatments so that we can evaluate all of that. Yes, sir.
Before you vote, would you indulge me one more ask?
Mm-hmm.
So, and this goes, again, beyond the street racing piece. You're going to hear tomorrow at the Chiefs press conference about we lost more people to traffic collisions this year in the city than we did to violent homicide. And as I look at simply the beginning of 2023, the 3 hit and runs where people left pedestrians in the intersection after they hit them that we've had so far in the city. The fact that speed is the primary collision factor to fatalities in this city, and it's not even a close second. We have to, as a community, amplify the conversations about traffic safety, and the consequences of ignoring the traffic safety guidelines. And so I know that Transit Services Bureau on the LAPD puts out a weekly traffic safety message. I know that other entities within the department have put out that safety messaging. And my ask is that all of the community groups that we touch, if we could amplify that message both on social media and in our conversations to neighborhood councils, to our constituencies, we have to have that conversation, because somewhere somebody thought it was okay to hit somebody in a pedestrian and run from that scene. Somewhere somebody thought that it was okay to do 80 miles an hour on a public street because they wanted to avoid the consequence of a simple property damage only collision, and ended up killing 3 out of 4 family members, leaving a 2-year-old alone in the world in South Los Angeles. Somewhere that is in our consciousness as being the right decision to make. And that can only be changed with conversations that family members have with family members, that constituents have with constituents, that people who are faith-based have with other faith-based people. This is not an enforcement issue. It's not even an engineering issue. It's a cultural issue. and we need to take it on in that way. So that would be my ask from your chairs and your constituencies. Please have those conversations and amplify the safety messaging that comes from whatever source, from DOT, from LAPD. But if we're not talking about traffic, more people are going to die.
Thank you for that, Chief. Appreciate it. And with that, Mr. Lidd, would you please call the roll on the item as amended?
Okay. Councilmember Rodriguez?
Aye.
Councilmember Lee?
Aye.
Councilmember McCosk? Councilmember Park?
Yes.
Councilmember Soto Martinez?
Yes.
Very good. This matter is approved.
Thank you very much, and I believe that clears the desk.
That clears the desk.
Thank you all very much. We are adjourned.